So now we're slicing through coronal from ear to ear. Here you can see that this is the temporal lobe here. Inside the temporal lobe, there's this area here called the hippocampus, which is involved in memory. Then there's the parietal lobe up here. And here's the thalamus, which we talked about, the VPL of the thalamus, which is that big relay of all the sensory inputs coming in. There's also other thalamic areas like that are taking in sensory inputs from the auditory system and sensory inputs from the visual system and relaying them back to their primary sensory areas. Do you know what sense is the only sense that doesn't go through the thalamus? Smell. Yeah, so smell. So some people say smell actually evokes much more emotional response than any other sensory because it's sort of more directly wired than the other ones where we sort of filter it out. Down here is the midbrain. This actually has a lot of nuclei that carry a lot of neurotransmitters that project very widely throughout the brain and actually are used to upregulate or downregulate the neuronal activity very widespread. One of the areas, like the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, has a very wide projections, and the idea is to put electrodes in there and stimulate away, and maybe we could actually suppress all the cortical activity a little bit and reduce the propensity of somebody who has epilepsy to have seizures. And so this has been a method that's been tried by Medtronic with limited success. So locus ceruleus, substantia nigra, these are areas that carry dopamine and norepinephrine and project throughout the brain, send these more modulatory neurotransmitters. And then hippocampus. Has everybody seen Memento? So yeah, this guy is suffering from hippocampal damage. And so there's the famous patient HM who had really bad epilepsy, and they went in and they found that the epilepsy was started here in the hippocampus, so they went and sucked out that hippocampus, and then he continued to have epilepsy, so they went on the other side and sucked out the hippocampus entorhinal cortex, and then he stopped seizing, but you walk in and 10 minutes later and he doesn't recognize who you are, and his wife passed away several years later, and he can't remember that his wife has passed away. He can remember anything before the surgery. So hippocampus is used to generate new memory. So he has the inability. There's anterograde amnesia, which is the inability to create new memories. There's retrograde amnesia, which is what you see in all the TV shows where somebody wakes up and they can't remember who they are. That's anterograde amnesia. He had... or that's retrograde, sorry. HM had anterograde amnesia, and they did lots and lots of studies on him, showing that they could train him to do a task like look in a mirror and do a maze while looking in the mirror, which is a really difficult task because everything's backwards from where you do your movement. They say, can you do this? And he's like, no, I've never seen this before. And then well, why don't you give it a try? And he would try it. He's like, damn, I'm good at this. But he's like, well, because you've done it like 1,000 times, you just don't remember. But he was able to do a lot of really neat things. There's another really amazing one is a guy who had he was a conductor, and he had a virus that killed off his hippocampus, and he couldn't really remember that he was a conductor, and they brought him up in front of his orchestra and said, well, why don't you try conducting? And then he was like, wow, I'm really good at this. I know how to do this. And they were like, yeah, because you've been conducting us for 10 years. But could not remember a single thing